Hi guys, I've got another 3 to Inspire challenge for you today. I'm going to be using the add-on kit from Citrus Twist, and I've also got this photo of Jack looking thoroughly unimpressed on his first meeting with Santa. So the first thing I want to do is pick out a background. There are so many pretty pattern papers in this kit. It was very hard to choose. I was going to go with one of these cardstocks, the plain colored cardstocks, but actually I really love this star paper from the Snowflake collection, so I'm going to use that. Now my first challenge for you is to use a pocket, and the way I am going to use a pocket for this layout is I grabbed a 12 by 12 page protector and I trimmed out the middle section, so it's got 4 3 by 4 pockets in it. I just trimmed all the extra plastic off, and what I'm going to do is stitch that down onto my background. So I took that over to my sewing machine. I just used a little bit of washi tape to tape it in place while I was stitching, and I've stitched around all of the pockets. So I've stitched all the sides and those middle pieces so that I can just slip in my photos. And I've also gone ahead and printed out some of the digital Christmas stories journaling cards as well. So you can see I've slipped my photo into the second pocket on the left, and I'm just going to arrange some of these journaling cards into the other pockets. Now the fun thing about using the pockets this way is you actually get 2 pockets in one, because the photo can slip into the front pocket, and then there's also, when you stitch it down like that, you've created a second pocket behind. So you could also add in little tags or additional journaling or any sort of fun little thing you want to tuck in there. You've got 2 lots of pockets. Now because I trimmed off the excess plastic to stitch those down, the 2 pockets on the sides are just slightly smaller than 3 inches. So I trimmed down my journaling card, the one that says holiday cheer there. I'm going to do my journaling on that. And the other pocket on the left, I decided instead of adding another journaling card, I wanted to add a little bit more pattern, a bit more color to the page. So I'm going back through the 12 by 12 papers to pick out something to go in here. And I think the Christmas tree paper has to be it. I do love that really dark maroon colored Heidi Swap paper as well, but I'm going to go with the Christmas trees, I think. I don't want to add too much pink to this layout, so I'm sticking with the more neutral colors. I'm just going to use one of the other journal cards to trim this little corner out of this paper here, just so that I can save as much as I can from the rest of it. And then I've got my little fake journaling card, which I can just slip into the pocket. That's kind of the base of my layout done. So I'm going to start doing a little bit of embellishing. And this is the second part of the challenge for you, which is to create 3 clusters of embellishments. It's going to take me a tiny while to do that. I'm opening up all of the Snowflake ephemera pack, and I'm just going to go through it in a couple of different stages, I guess. The first time I'm going through this pack, I'm pulling out the ones I could use and the ones I definitely will not use, and just making 2 little piles. I'm not going to use nearly all of these, but I do find when you've got a huge ephemera pack like this and you want to make a few little clusters, it does kind of help to just give yourself less to look through. So I'm separating the ones I definitely will not use to the ones that I could use. Now once I've got these ones that I could use, I'm going to be a little bit more selective and start actually placing some where I might want them to go. I'm going to have a fairly large cluster here in the middle underneath the pink journaling card, so that the journaling card almost becomes a part of that cluster. I'm going to create a slightly smaller one at the top here, and then there'll be an even smaller one down the bottom. So I'm just going through placing where I want to go, just being a little bit more selective about which pieces are going to go where. I do want to add a few smaller pieces and some larger ones, just creating that layered effect. But what I wanted to do was, before I start sticking anything down, I want my main cluster here in the middle to have sort of a base to it. So I'm going to use this scalloped circle die, and I am going to finally use this really pretty paper. I'm just going to die cut a scalloped circle, and I'm going to build my cluster on top of that. It just gives me a really solid base to start from and just adds an extra layer to it. There are all sorts of stickers on this gorgeous Heidi Swap sticker sheet. This one here, I really want to use it. It's going to add an extra layer for me, but I don't want to just place it down because I don't know where it's going at the moment. So I've just stuck it onto a little bit of scrap paper and I'm going to trim around the outside of it, and that just gives me like a second ephemera piece basically that I can shift around without worrying that I've stuck it onto the background paper. Now I love these puffy stickers from the Snowflake collection as well. I do find though that they're not particularly sticky, so I'm gonna have to come up with another solution to that, and I think that's gonna bring in my third challenge to you, which is to add some texture with stitching. Now I've already stitched all of those little pockets down, but I'm also gonna add some stitching as kind of an embellishment piece as well, a way to add a little bit more detail and a little bit more texture. So I very carefully used my sewing machine to stitch those puffy stickers onto my scallop circle, and I also stitched all the way around the edge of the Heidi Swap sticker. Now to add even more texture to this, I'm going to use a little bit of a crepe paper ruffle around the edge of this ephemera piece, and it's super easy to do. I just got one of these crepe paper streamers and I decided to use a white one just so it didn't add too much colour, and I'm just adding a little bit of tape runner around each edge of the ephemera piece, and then just carefully, well, or not so carefully, ruffling up the crepe paper around the outside of it, just creating little folds and ripples to give it even more texture. Once I've done all four sides, I can just trim the streamer off. And then I'm going to use my scissors to just tidy up around the edge of it. It's easier to do it this way than to try and make it the right size as you go. I can just trim it down so it's about 1/2 inch all the way around the piece. You don't have to be too careful with that, but it just gives this nice fancy ruffly edge, and it looks a little bit sort of festive and snowy and pretty, and I think it adds a nice texture to this piece as well. So now that I've got my sort of 3 main pieces for this cluster, I'm going to add a few smaller bits and pieces, and then I'm going to do a little bit more layering with some foam adhesive just to try and get a bit more dimension into here, raise some things up a bit. I'm also leaving some of the threads from my stitched pockets. I've left them long so that I can sort of tuck them into the layers and add even more texture. So here we go, I've got the basics down, and I'm going to be very careful to try and stick it back as I had it, but it never really ends up quite in the same place, but I'm going to commit and start sticking some things down now. I'm just using tape runner for all of this, even though some of those pieces are sticking onto the plastic pocket, enough of it is going to be touching the actual paper background that I'm not worried about it coming off at any point. Now I love the gold, the sort of rosy gold in this collection, but it's summer here, so the snow theme doesn't really apply, so I am going to use that little wreath piece as a background and just have the wee border sticking out. It kind of echoes the scallop circle that I've already made. So I added the first label with some foam adhesive, and I'm going to do the same with this little car, but because it's going to sit on top of the label, it needs a double piece of foam just on the right hand side there so that everything's going to be laying flat. And that's going to sit nicely there, so I can add a little bit of a tape runner to the craft foam and just stick that down. And I've kind of got a sort of empty space on the label, so I want to add a few little words there. I still have a title to add to this layout, so I don't necessarily want to squeeze my title onto that tiny little spot, so I am just going to add a couple more of those ephemera pieces. And continuing to build the layers with the foam as well, so just adding extra layers where I need to make sure that everything sits nice and flat. I'm going to go back and add this little puffy sticker Joy. It really is very pretty, but like I said, the stickiness of the sticker is not particularly sticky. You can see there it doesn't stick at all to this piece, so I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive behind there just to make sure that nothing falls off while I'm sticking this layout into my album or just at any point in the album. So I'm just adding a little bit of glue behind those puffy stickers, and then I'll be careful not to move them while I'm finishing up the rest of my layout. Now I realize I've only got 2 clusters so far. I will get to the third one very shortly, but it has occurred to me that I haven't actually stuck anything down up the top here. So I'm going to start working on that cluster, and this one's going to be a lot more simple. I am just going to add that same stitching for texture again by just stitching 2 of the die cut pieces together before I stick them down. I'm not adding any foam to this top one. It's going to be much flatter, but it's just that small visual element at the top that's going to help draw your eye across the layout. So you can see I've got through the top, and it goes through my pattern, through my photo, sorry, down to the middle cluster, which will hold my title, and then I'm going to add a third little cluster to the bottom, but I want somewhere to put it. So what I'm going to do is add a strip of this pattern paper to the bottom. Now the easiest way to do that I found is I'm just trimming off the branding strip at the bottom of that pattern paper. I'm going to sort of knock the 2 together so they're in line, and then I'm going to add a line of stitching to the bottom of my layout. Then I could just slip my scissors under here and just roughly trim it out. I do want to keep that texture of the stitching and sort of the roughness of the cutting, so I don't want anything too straight. I'm just using my scissors to roughly trim that. And then I can go ahead and cut off the pattern paper at the back. It doesn't matter how neatly you do that, you'll never see it. And then I can make sure that my page is still exactly 12 by 12, but I have that little border strip down the bottom, which I really like. Plus it gives me a place to add a third cluster at the bottom. So I'm using a couple of the cut off pieces that I've already used from the top there, as well as just roughing that up a little bit more to give it a bit more height. And then I'm only going to add just a couple of other little die cuts down the bottom. So I don't want to take away any of the visual presence of the middle cluster, but I do just want to keep that flowing through the layout. The other thing I wanted to do was to add a few of these little Christmas trees, and I am going to do the same thing. I'm going to glue these down, especially these ones that are going to be sitting onto the plastic page protectors. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a visual triangle with these trees, so I am going to add 3. I've added 1 to the middle cluster, I'm adding 1 down the bottom, and my third one I'm just going to add slightly off to the side in the middle. I don't want to add it at the top. It would just add a bit too much visual weight, I think. So just going to add my third one here, and it looks a little bit lonely at the moment, a little bit lost, but the point is that I'm going to add my title in soon, and that will tie all of this together and sort of create one big cluster through the middle. I'm keeping my title super simple, and I'm just using the alphas from the kit. These are from the Snowflake collection too. I really love them, they're beautiful. I'm just going to spell out Hello Santa. Jack was definitely not impressed with Santa. Tried to yank his beard, so luckily it was actually real, so there were no drama or tears from the other children. But he was definitely not impressed meeting Santa. I decided to move the word Santa down a little bit more and tuck it under that crepe paper ruffle there, just to emphasize those layers a bit more. And so because I'd only lightly put down the hello, it was really easy just to move that down and sit on top of it. Now there's a few little tiny word stickers on this Heidi Swap sticker sheet. They're not Christmas related, but they do still work really nicely for this Christmas layout. So I'm just going to pick out a few of those and add them on top of that Christmas tree. Again, the whole thing is to try and tie all of this together. I'm going to add 1 more underneath my little paper ruffle, again emphasizing those layers, but just filling in this sort of visual gap down the bottom where it got a little bit too light. And then as a finishing touch, I'm just going to add a few of these little enamel dots around the page, just to add a little bit of glitz and sparkle, and well, just because I like them, to be honest. They're so pretty. And then that's pretty much the layout done. So that's my challenge for you today. Use a pocket, create 3 clusters, and add texture with your stitching. I will leave all the details for the blog post down below in the description box, so do head over to the Citrus Twist blog and check it out. I love how this layout turned out, so pretty, and just a little bit special having Jack's first Santa photo there. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, there's a couple more videos on screen, or why not check out my Patreon page? There are even more videos over there. Otherwise, I'll see you again real soon. Bye.